Welcome back for another installment of Fellowship of the Rink. Episode 25 here with me, as always, Joe Smith of The Athletic, bringing you all the insider info on your Minnesota Wild and Gophers hockey. Joe, how are we feeling?
Feeling good. I feel like my confidence level is high, or at least I'm fake confidence, because we're bringing our 7-week-old on our first overnight away trip to a cabin in Wisconsin. So we're optimistic, cautiously optimistic that the relaxing expectation that we have for it will line up. We've been doing some training, some sleep training in a pack and play versus that usual bassinet. So we're hoping that is fruitful. But yeah, I'm prepared to come back next week and be like, that was the worst decision of my life, or this is a formative moment for our son. His first swimsuit and first lake time, first trip on a boat, all that stuff. So stay tuned.
Yeah, God bless. And going to Wisconsin, I hope you're not tempted to give him his first beer over there. I know they really wouldn't frown upon that.
Drinking age is what? 9-10 weeks?
Drinking age is if your parent says yes.
Yes. We've all had beers before our time. I think mine was more like 11 or 12, or, grandpa gave me a sip of beer, and it was like the worst tasting thing I've ever had in my life. It was like an old Milwaukee.
Brilliantly. I think I was like 4, and he gave me a sip of his Coors Light, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm never going to drink beer again.
This is horrible. I can't, what is this? It doesn't taste good. And I'm like, then all of a sudden I'm like, give me all the IPAs I want, So
well, now Coors Light tastes like water to me. So like, I don't know what happened.
I can just crush it. So anyways, that's what shows how you grow in over 30 years. But so let's keep you posted on how baby boy does on his first trip with it. So overall, we're hopeful.
Yeah, that's fair. And no spoilers.
Spoiler alert. Anyone that is currently watching and hasn't completed or has yet to start season 2, House of the Dragon, be aware next 4 or 5 minutes, you might want to skip over quick.
I know we've had our back and forths on the latest season of House of the Dragon, an extension off of Game of Thrones. How do we feel about how the season went?
I'm disappointed in the finale. Like, I know finales are supposed to be a teaser. Like, they're supposed to get you on the cliffhanger to wait for next season, which is in 2 years, but it felt like a whole huge trailer for season 3.
Yeah.
And at least have some of the fights. At least go have Snake go down because he doesn't know what's coming. Or at least have like some sort of, one kind of, somebody has to die, or somebody has to have some sort of, big change or momentum swing, I think, going into another one. That's why Game of Thrones did so well.
Yeah.
Wasn't one of them like the dragon coming out of the water? It's like what a season finale or whatever. I don't know, but like they pulled it,
yeah, they pull him out with the chains. Yeah. But but that came off of the heels of a big moment.
It did come off the heels of a big moment, and I think the best part of the last finale here was Daemon seeing into the future through the Raven and like seeing what happens and seeing Daenerys in the future. Like, that was the coolest part for me, is him recognizing that and kind of like.
It's Game of Thrones had like cliffhangers in every episode, but every like 80% of the episodes had substance to them. They weren't just plot movers. Where I'm with you, this was a hour-long trailer for something that's going to come in 2 years, and I was not thrilled with that, and I was generally not thrilled with the season. Like, there was 1 or 2 solid episodes. Outside that, I just felt rushed. I didn't feel like the plot developed very well, but I know there's other people that have been big fans of it, so I'm probably wrong. But I don't know. I'm almost to the point where I'm upset about it, that finale, to the extent that, like, I don't know, maybe I just won't watch the next season. We'll see.
Well, you have 2 years, man. It could be, the whole world could be over by then, like by the time that, what, 2029 is going to be the season 4, which is the last season.
Jeez.
Like, well, what's your bet on, is Allison playing a big game here at the end, or is she being truthful? Is she just being like this another like trying to pull the queen into like a fake like a rope and dope, or is she actually contrite now that her son's gone safely into?
Well, she doesn't know that.
Yeah.
I think she has all of the intentions of doing the right thing, and if Rhaenyra is actually bought in and like goes forward with it, it's just going to make shit go even further south when it's like, oh, where's the king? And oh, Aemond isn't on board with this, and it's just like it's going to unravel really quickly and go really poorly. But I do think right now Alicent, at least current state, believes that she's being honest, but that can easily change with just one wrinkle in the plot, because for her it's more so like, oh, everyone's going to die and I basically just want to protect my daughter.
Yeah. I mean, I think she wanted to catch her in ships and be like, I want to live. Like I set this whole thing in motion. I feel bad about it, but now I'm like, oh fuck, I'm getting out. Like I don't want to deal with this power hungry stuff anymore. Too bad for two sons. One's going to die and another one's going to die probably. So
we'll see. We'll see.
Join us in the Brainerd Lakes area this Labor Day weekend for the CRMC Championship presented by Gertens at Cragen's Legacy Courses. Last year's PGA Tour America's Tournament of the Year kicks off Thursday, August 30th, with free admission for everyone. VIP tickets are available and could go fast, so do not wait to claim access to 3 hospitality areas that have your food and beverage needs covered. Last year, Faber, Shaw, Addison, and Walker were out in full force supporting their teammate and one of your favorite Minnesota Wild players in Matt Boldy. Who knows which Wild players you might run into this year, not to mention 2-time Stanley Cup champion Sean Chambers getting in on the action. Don't miss the Saturday Night Jam on the 18th green featuring The Hype. This is your chance to watch the next PGA Tour superstar right here in Brainerd, Minnesota. For more information, visit crmcchampionship.com.
But okay, now that we've gotten through nerd talk, let's talk a little bit of hockey. And Joe, I know there's been 2 articles released recently on The Athletic that we need to dive into a little bit more. And this first one might be a little bit of rehash, but Patrik Laine, I mean, it sounds like the way that people are positioning this, he could be the type of guy that Bill Guerin would want to make a move for, that being through thorough vetting. But where are things at now? Like, has Guerin reached out? Do we have any sense for whether like the Blue Jackets are even interested in working with the Wild?
Yeah, the sense we got, they didn't reach out as of late last week, and the expectation is there'd be some sort of reach out period this week. Line A is now available to talk to teams, which is important because they want to see where his head's at, see how he's feeling physically, see where he wants to go. I know he had, I think, a modified no trade clause. So I would expect just the gist from getting the sense from the organization that they'd be interested, even though it's a cautious interest level, because they don't really have an easy way to do it, right? It's like, oh, I'd love to do this, but I'd love to do this crazy trip. I don't have the money for it, right? It'd be great. So I would expect to have some conversations there. It could be a quick one, like maybe they feel it out, they don't want to pursue it, or maybe they get to Columbus and Columbus is like, I think Columbus would work with the Wild. I think it's more so, do they really want to hold to their claim? Dunwoody else says he doesn't want to eat half the contract. And if he doesn't want to eat half the contract, it'd be really hard for the Wild it'd be like, all right, sorry, we can't do it. And the way the Wild can do it would even probably have to include a third team at some point if you don't have the assets to kind of move around and everything. You know what I mean? So if they would take on part of his salary or whatever. So like we wrote in our story for Monday, me and Mike Russo, we got some insight from Aaron Portsline, our really good Blue Jackets writer who's plugged in on kind of what the Blue Jackets would want off the Wild roster, what they're looking for, what was Laine's level of play, and kind of where they're at in terms of that. So I think it was interesting to get his perspective too, because we're not just throwing stuff at the at the wall here and seeing what sticks. It is unlikely. It's kind of one of those kind of long shot things, but it is intriguing. Why we wrote about it, because it's a guy that I think the Wild would take a chance on if it could be worked out on the money wise. I just don't know what the pieces that the Wild would have to trade, if that'd be the right amount or if it fit financially for the deal to work.
Yeah. And am I oversimplifying it to think that this probably isn't as much of a talking point if there's more going on in the Wild's offseason?
I think the fact that it is early August probably is part of it, just because it's not like during a season where you have a bunch of different stories, different little things going on. It is kind of the dog days, and there aren't many other really free agents or big names on the trade board out there still, you know? So I think he's one of those guys where it was more of a new development that he got let out, or he was exited the player assistance program, which was kind of a tipping point where that kind of gave it a kind of a news peg, like, okay, well, now that he's out, now that there's an idea of, okay, he could be available. And then Don Waddell started that off by kind of talking about, you know, potential trade. And so that kind of led into more why there was kind of a revisit of it. Because we wrote about it at the draft, if you remember, like Russo and I, that there was interest level from the Wild in Laine at or around the draft. Of course, back then they had more cap space to work with. Like if they didn't sign Yakov Trenin, which could very well end up being a really good signing, that's another $3.5 million or so, and we're having a different conversation now. But I think it was just interesting for me that the Wild went to the offseason initially thinking, let's look at the top 6 winger or top 6 forward to add to our group, and they have a lot of guys out there in free agency, which you tend to overpay on. And then it kind of pivoted just after their organizational meetings, and like, we need to get back to their identity, right? They need to get back to that kind of their swagger back. They need to be harder to play against, because they were at times in those tough divisional games last year, not hard enough to play, not tough enough in those games, the Nashville game, the St. Louis game. So they pivoted from that top 6 thing to a Yakov Trenin. It's more of an identity kind of player versus taking a swing at a top 6 guy that they could have looked at, which there weren't a lot of guys out there that were really slam dunk guys to pick up, right, for whatever cap space it would take. But I think, which is why now it'll be interesting if they do pivot to this and they do find a way to get this done. If we kind of return to that model of getting both of those things done, just getting the identity part and then getting the help in the top 6 or getting additional scoring and star power. But like we said in the story too, like, you know, if you only have the certain amount of cap space and you have the cap space is dwindling next year when the buyouts are off the books, like, where do you want to invest that money? It's so important now to invest that money in smart places, right? Since you only have so much to spend in free agency. Once you have a Rossi, if he's still here, contract, a Wallstead contract, Faber's contract kicks in for his extension. So if you want to have money to play with and have for Kirill to be like, hey, the Wild can go up and make a splash, you got to be really, really careful of how you kind of dole out the rest of your money here. So that's where I kind of came in on it. Like, you have to be really sure that this is something going to be a difference maker for you. And it very well might. You know, he could be the guy who was really in Winnipeg, and all of a sudden you have a guy who can score 30, 40 goals, right? And that's something that would be a big difference maker. But you have to be really careful and really smart how you spend your dollars right now for the Minnesota Wild, because the whole promise of having that kind of, you know, spending spree after that buyouts are off the books it's getting a little less there. So it's really important to be prudent with that.
Yeah.
Unless I'm being Debbie Downer here, but like, I'm just thinking that's
no, you got to be prudent. But I do think it also warrants noting that largely for Laine, the issue has been injuries, because I think short 1 or 2 seasons, he has been pacing a 30-goal scorer. Like, that scoring prowess is there. It's really a matter of, like, there are very different versions of Patrik Laine. There's the one that shows up and is an absolute black hole in your lineup. There's the other that's going to score 5 games in a row and you're going to love him. And maybe Minnesota is what brings him around. Who knows? But like you said, a lot of hurdles for the team to get through if they want to get there, just based on how the team has been established. And that, I think, segues well to the other article, the front office confidence rankings, which every year The Athletic throws out. you get to vote both on your own team, but also get to give your perspective league wide. And I know last year the Wild came in at 11 out of 32, which I'd say that's pretty strong. A lot has happened since then. And Joe, where have we landed now?
The Wild are at 24 in this ranking. They were 11th last year. And so there's two different voting bases, the public and the fan base, right? And there are more confidence coming from the public versus the fan base, I think, from coming off of last year. So, obviously it was a surprise to me in the sense that we did a article for us, me and Mike, the fan survey, not too long ago. It was like early offseason thing. And we expected there would have been a drop in fan confidence in the front office. And there actually wasn't. People were holding strong for that. And so that's why this was kind of interesting or surprising to me and to us, because it felt like at least the ones that were polled, the ones in our subscriber base, the ones that filled out the questionnaires and stuff like that, there was still a level of, they're disappointed in a lot of different things, but they still have confidence in the future of what's coming. So the voting for this one is done on roster building, cap management, draft and develop, trading, free agency, vision, total. So there's a C+ total grade from public, C- from fan base. And there are some good grades here. Draft and developing is B+. Trading is C+. Free agency is C+. The biggest one that hurt them is the D+ for cap management. And so I think that for both rankings, that for both rankings is what really hurt them. And some of the comments on here, Bill Guerin is really committed to overspending, giving no trade clauses on depth players, even if the players themselves are easy to cheer for. Teams that win are teams with high-end talent, which is impossible to acquire or keep if all your money is tied up in good, not great players. So, I think that's the one main criticism, I think, from fan base is some of the decisions on the re-signing, giving extensions out early or signing guys a year in advance. Even like Jake Middleton got a contract extension for 4 years at 3.35. Maybe fans were thinking, oh, you just got Z'd by him in the draft. Maybe you don't commit to another left shot defenseman for 4 more years, knowing you have maybe a guy that could be your left shot guy in the top 4 starting next year. But I think there's some criticism there from fans. This voting was done before the Brock Faber extension, which I think was a really good move by the organization. The Brock Faber signing and the deal will end up, I think, aging very well, just like the Matt Boldy and Joel Eriksson Ek contracts, even to extend the Jonas Brodin contract. But yeah, I think this is the main issue for Wild fans, and it will come to a head, right? It'll come to a head next summer or right after that, whether or not they can prove to a guy like Kaprizov that they have the ability and the vision and the money to build enough around him. Now, if Bill Guerin, like he said, he's betting on his guys and his core, and then he's putting his money where his mouth is, and if those guys deliver on his faith, then all of a sudden it's a different discussion, right? But I think he's just clear. He's putting his betting on his guys, fair or not, right or wrong. That's the case, and that's where the schism between him and the fan base are. Is they like these guys, that they're fans of this player. They're easy to like a guy like Marcus Foligno, right? Who doesn't like Marcus Foligno? But they just don't know if they like him at 4x4 at this particular point in his career. So I think that's the biggest thing for the fan survey, or the biggest takeaway from why they dropped from 11th to 24th is the biggest difference since then. I mean, obviously missed the playoffs this year, but were the 3 extensions to Hartman, Foligno, and Zuccarello, Middleton, and whoever. So those are the biggest differences, the biggest changes that have been made since the survey was done last year. Yeah. So I don't know if you have any different thoughts on it, but that's kind of my read on it.
No, I don't disagree at all. And I think it's important, though, to think about, and maybe you think this is kind of negligible in the grand scheme of things, but do you think if those contracts happened the summer that they were up rather than a year early, do you think that changes these numbers at all and changes the fan view on how Guerin is, handling the cap management, working with roster building? Does that make a difference?
Well, I think it's the result of those contracts, right? Like, I don't think Zuccarello's contracts really bad or out of the world. It's 2 years extension, knowing what you knew then about him. But I think, Marcus Foligno coming off another core surgery, would he get 4x4? Again, maybe they still would. Ryan Hartman had another up and down season. So maybe if those contracts, they signed him July 1, they signed both of those guys July 1 for 4 years, 3.25. Are fans more happy?
Yeah, I don't know. And I think it's more just like, why did it have to happen? Because none of them were going to out earn what they were paid. They're basically paid, hey, if you have a good year this year, this is what you're going to make. And we're just going to give it to you now before going out and proving it. I think there are a lot of fans who took that to heart. And I also think, and we've talked about this a bunch and we're beating the dead horse here, largely, I don't hate any of the contracts individually. Like, you can nitpick a couple of them, sure. It's the fact that all of them were signed, right? Instead of picking or choosing, 2 or 3 of the guys instead of, 4 or 5. A lot of fans are like, great, we've got this great draft and develop. That's what graded best for public and fan base. And whether it's true or not, because I know you and Russo have reported on this plenty, and it's not necessarily that prospects are completely being boxed out, but that's the fan base perspective. They're like, great, we're doing all this drafting. These guys are never going to get a chance to play because Guerin's just going to keep on paying the older guys. That hurts the overall fan base perspective, I think.
Yeah, and this year, if let's say Ogren plays top 6 minutes, Kuznetsov plays in the league, plays in the team for 80 games, Wallstedt comes in and flourishes, right? Like, all of a sudden,
next year we're top 10.
You know what I mean? Like, does that change things? Then all of a sudden they come in and you're off. Zeev Bayam signs and Denver loses in the playoffs, and he signs and he makes a rock paper like impression in April, and then all of a sudden Yurov comes over for development camp. Like, is all of a sudden, how does that look? Obviously playoffs is one thing. If you miss the playoffs again, then I think people are going to be a little ticked off as well. But I'm just saying, like, where is that group then, the fan base then, if that's your end of the year, how it looks?
Yeah, no, that's all knee jerk for sure. They'll probably be top 10 in next year's rankings. It's crazy how that works.
Yeah, I mean, so again, and obviously, I think this is a great kind of exercise that Dom does, and they do get a lot of votes for it, and it does provide perspective and fans an outlet to say and kind of feel overall. I need to get the numbers overall, how many votes there were, just to get for perspective and stuff. We had the votes written down for our survey we did months back, but yeah, I think it just puts in perspective. The top 3 teams are there. For the Florida Panthers won the Stanley Cup. The Lightning are number 3, I think, right? So they have some of the top teams there, but it was surprising to me that the Wild are behind, let's say, the San Jose Sharks, for example. They do have the prospect pool. They are deep in the rebuild, right? They have Will Smith. They have Kessel Rainey. But considering the moves that the San Jose Sharks made the last 3 years, getting rid of some of their older guys or their top name players. So that was a little surprising to me. They're behind a team like that, right? So
yeah. And it feels like fans trying to go out of their way to prove something. Like, we are not happy with how this year went for a lot of reasons. We're burning it all to the ground. Like, if you look objectively at a lot of the teams that are ahead of them, it's like, okay, they really should be kind of like middle-ish of the pack. Tell you what, let's even call it like 18, 19, 20. Like, I wouldn't be looking at it the same way if that's where they landed, but it is.
I mean, the Rangers are 17. The Rangers are 17, and they just went to the conference final 2 years in a row, right? And they're at a C. They're a C+ grade, right? So, The Ducks are 16, the Capitals are 15.
I gotta say, Predators being at 10 is weirdly low for me. They should be like top 5.
Roster building A-, free agency A+, that'll change your narrative right there too, right? Cap management B, they got rid of some big contracts, right? It's interesting exercise. I'm glad we do it. I know don't want to overreact too much to it, but I think it's worth bringing up and what it means or where it stems from, I guess. And I think the true tell on how a fan base feels about a team or if they're disgruntled is in the ticket booth, right? And
that is a fact.
if there is some residual stuff this year to start the season, that'll be the bigger tell for me is how many fans sold tickets or not are at the X. Because this is a really
I think that's tough though this year, Joe, because there's only 2 home games in October. So those are both selling out. It'll be interesting to see how that long road trip goes. That's going to drive all of the gate for November.
No, it will. Like, you're right. Like the first 2 games, like the Dean's coming back, they're going to come in droves for that. So I guess what I mean overall is that's really when you can tell the fan base, because it's been a really loyal fan base and they've been patient. And our guest this week is Tom Jones, a good friend of mine and former colleague at the Tampa Bay Times, who was the original beat writer for the Minnesota Wild, for the Minnesota Star Tribune. And we just talked about on the change in expectations of a franchise over the course of years, over the course of 2 decades, right? Where, the excitement and energy and they could do no wrong in the early years versus now there's just the longer track record of not getting to where they want to go. So that's where you'll see more discontent from fans because of that longer leash. Like Bill Guerin's right. These players haven't been here for 20 years, so they can't blame them for what happened 10, 12 years ago. But the reality is that they're a part of this narrative and history, fair or not, for fans, so that's where I think you can see in the fan rankings.
Yeah. Well, hey, with that, let's kick it over. This interview is brought to you by our friends at Waggle Golf. Waggle Golf believes what you wear on the course should reflect your individuality, who you are, where you're from, your hobbies, interests, and passions. All the stuff that makes you, well, you. That's why every design is inspired by the desire to create a piece of apparel that strikes a chord when you see it, that makes you say, wow, that was made for me. Because in a lot of ways, it was. Ready to get your waggle on? Go to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 at checkout to take 10% off your entire order. Joining the show today is one of us by way of covering the beginning, the origins of the Minnesota Wild expansion team, unfortunately departing right before the legendary 2003 playoff run, followed by a long tenure with the Tampa Bay Times, and now writing for Poynter, where you can follow along with his daily newsletters at poynter.org, Tom Jones. Thanks for jumping onto this, Tom.
My sense of timing is impeccable, as Joe will tell you that I covered the Wild for 3 years and then left right before that magical playoff run. Then I was a sports columnist at the Tampa Bay Times and thought, I've written every sports column there is to write, right, in Tampa Bay. So I leave, and as soon as I leave, Tom Brady comes to Tampa. The Super Bowl's in Tampa. They win the Super Bowl in Tampa. The Lightning go to back-to-back Stanley Cups and win them. And the Rays go to the World Series. But other than that, the timing's spot on.
So now what we got to speculate on is what's going to happen when you leave Poynter.
I know. I mean, after the last 3 weeks, I cover the media, news media. After the last 3 weeks or month, I can't imagine anything could get any wilder than what we've seen.
Yeah, I think that's a very safe statement to make.
Yeah,
exactly.
What'll happen next? Oh, it's Donald Trump will be president. Yeah, we already seen that before. So nothing crazier than that. It's we ask every person who comes on a Rorschach test what you first thought when you saw the Wild logo. Like, what do you see when you look at it?
I love the Wild logo. I mean, it strikes me as outdoor. I think the first word I think of is outdoors. I mean, that's the word that jumped out at me. I remember when I first started covering the team back in we were just talking about the original team back in 2000. I love the logo. It's one of those logos too that I think when people, I don't know, does anybody not like it? Maybe over the past several years, the feelings have changed, but it felt like back in 2000, like everybody was on board, both inside and outside Minnesota. How do people like it now there?
It's hit or miss, definitely. Like some people love it. Some people very much don't want it. And I think half of those people, honestly, are still just bitter and want the North Stars everything back, which, hey, I get it. Crisp, beautiful logo. But it's funny just seeing every year. And the reason that we incorporate this every time is it's like every 6 months, I'll just see all of a sudden a new crazy thread on Twitter or X, if we'll call it that, where someone's like, holy crap, did you guys know that the Wild logo is a bear? And like people will just like start spewing off. Some are like, no, you're crazy. Others are like, you're just seeing that. And other people are like, oh my God, I see it now. It's like, how does this keep happening over and over in new waves? So
here's what I don't understand. To explain this to me, and the North Star, like this affinity for the North Stars, like they go back to these throwback uniforms. I get it. Throwback uniforms. Everybody does it. It's a way to make some money. I get all that. But how many times did the Wild wear like the green and yellow last season? Like more than a couple of times, right?
Yeah.
So I don't understand. Like they're good. Explain to me the whole like the North Stars left. When I was there in 2000, people hated the North Star or hated the Dallas Stars. Norm Green was, a curse word practically, and then they embrace it these days. I don't get it. I don't understand it.
It's funny too, because I don't know, Joe, maybe you have a different perspective on it, but I feel like most of the people that are like getting upset and clamoring for all of the old North Star stuff back are people that weren't even alive for the North Stars to exist. Like I was 4 when they left. Like some of the people that like get outraged and want to claim nostalgia, it's like, yeah, okay. Like because you looked it up online. Cool.
Yeah.
I know. What they leave 93, right? Left in 93. Is that right?
94.
94.
Yeah.
Okay. It's been like coming up on 30 years either way. And it's, so you're right. Like even if you were 7 at the time, that's, I just can't imagine that you remember it well enough that you miss it. I don't know. I don't understand it. I love the Wild's colors. Their current colors. I love the emblem. I love the logo. I love everything about it. I don't know. I thought it was really cool.
So you think that was the right choice, though? Like back when they were choosing between all the different options, I don't know how aware you were of what they were choosing from. You were like, yeah, Wild, they got it right.
Yeah, I thought they got it right. I thought it incorporated everything. It struck me as outdoorsy. It was definitely an outdoorsy type feel to it, which is I think was what they were going for. I've never been a huge a huge fan of names that don't end in S.
Yeah.
It's because, and I covered, like Joe and I both, we covered the Tampa Bay Lightning as well. And it was one of those things where the paper that I worked at in both places, the Tampa Bay Times and then the Minneapolis Star Tribune, treated the Wild as a singular now, which I never liked. I never said the Wild is undefeated in their last 5 games, or the Wild is
struggling on a power play or whatever.
Right, exactly. I always thought it should be Wild R or Lightning R.
Agreed.
And like I said, both papers I worked at, the Times and the Star Tribune, treated it as singular, which I just never liked it. The Times eventually changed it, I think, but
I think to R.
It took a lot of arm wrestling to do it. Yeah, yeah. Because nobody talks like that, so I write it like that.
As you know, the podcast is called Fellowship of the Rink, a stick tap to our Lord of the Rings fandom. We talk beer, we talk being new dads and the stresses of that. But I was curious what your nerd itch is. I think I know what it might be in terms of you're a big baseball nut. Is that Stratomatic? I think.
So I am a big card and dice sports game simulate player. I'm right now currently playing the 1977 Major League Baseball season solo in Stratomatic baseball. I am about to approach 900 games in. I'm the Minnesota Twins. Rod Carews hitting like 411 in my league. It's unbelievable. So that's it. I play Apple hockey too, and Stratomatic hockey and Stratomatic basketball. I play it all. Yeah. So that's my that's definitely my nerd, my geek habit or hobby.
He's a big IPA guy too. So Tom, we'd all get along and get together to love IPAs. Sky's my good beer buddy up here. We like to go different places and grab a few. And me and Tom,
Tampa was good. Tampa checked out.
So it didn't used to be that way in downtown St. Petersburg, which is just growing like leaps and bounds. It's just amazing. And now that the new stadium is going to be built here, it really will, I think, continue to grow. But yeah, a big craft brewery scene in St. Peter, particularly in St. Pete, but in Tampa as well. Yeah, very strong, very strong.
I guess, how would you compare covering expansion franchises in both states, right? Like the Minnesota Wild and team coming back, everyone was probably just thrilled to death that they finally get hockey back in Minnesota, and then Tampa Bay, which was kind of played in what they call cow pasture or cow palace kind of thing. It was kind of unknown. So obviously two majorly different markets, but how would you compare covering the expansion team in both different places?
Yeah, the early on in covering the Tampa Bay Lightning, there were still times early in our coverage where we had to explain what a power play was, or explain what icing was, or explain what too many men were, and just a lot of catchphrases that a lot of people here got, but there were also a lot of new fans too who didn't realize the famous story about the very first game in Lightning history. Chris Kontos scores 4 goals, and when he scored his third, people started throwing hats on the ice, and security grabbed people for throwing something on the ice, like they didn't realize. Like, no, you're allowed. That's Phil Esposito actually had to come over and tell the security to unhand the guy. That obviously changed over the years, as you know, Joe. Like it's a really smart hockey market. Like people in Tampa and in St. Petersburg, Tampa Bay area, they are really smart hockey fans, and you no longer have to explain power play. Mm-hmm. But when I got to Minneapolis and St. Paul, I was struck by just like everybody knows hockey, like everybody. You don't have to explain. Forget about like the small details, like what is a power play, but like who should be on the power play. They had definite opinions about all of that stuff, and it was just really interesting to see. Now, I will say, as excited as people were for the Wild to come there, I was also blown away by just how strong the fandom was for the Gophers and Gopher hockey and high school hockey. When you get there, they call it the state of hockey. And as an outsider, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cute. Like, no, it really is the state of hockey. Like, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, where everything's football. High school football. Like, it's the same level of passion. I don't have to tell you guys. And so that's what struck me about going to Minnesota. And my kids played hockey. My oldest son started playing first, and he was probably like 7 at the time. And so I knew a lot of the parents, and they were like, they know who I was, just because, I read everybody followed the coverage. And it was really cool just how everybody was into it when I first got to the Twin Cities.
Was there like a welcome to Minnesota moment that kind of struck you? This market's different. Like for mine, like me and Caitlin and our dog Sammy went to Duluth, and we were a random brewery out in the fall when we first got there, and somebody came up to me like, "Hey Joe, thanks for moving here. I appreciate it." Blah blah blah. Like it's in the middle of nowhere, Duluth, and like someone's like, "I'm like, how do you know who I am and like what it looks like?" Like I'm not a big this big name guy or like that, but
it was probably going to a rink with my son, and somebody come up and say, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" And I'm like, "Oh, I work at the Star Tribune." And then I'm like, "Oh yeah, Tom Jones, yeah, I read you every day." That sort of thing. The other really cool thing, there were actually a couple. I remember getting a call one night at my house, and my wife answered the phone, and she says, and I heard her say hello. This is back before cell phones, really. We had them, but people still called your house. And my wife answered. She's like, "Yeah, hold on." And she goes, "Somebody named Herb is on the phone for you?" And I'm like, "Herb? I don't know Herb." And then I get on. It was Herb Brooks. And he had read a story that I had written, and he wanted to talk about it. And I actually got to know Herb pretty well over the years. And I just thought it was the coolest thing in the history of Earth that Herb Brooks called me and wanted to talk hockey. So that was one of my. And then I remember getting on an elevator with a couple of the 80 Olympians, like Rob McClanahan, and I forget who else it was. And then like Mike Ramsey was one of the assistant coaches on that team, on that first Wild team. But getting on an elevator at the press box at XL, and having Rob McClanahan introduce himself and realizing like, yeah, everybody reads you here. It's not, and it wasn't necessarily me, but I just happened to work at the Star Tribune. And then, of course, the next question is, how's Sid?
Yeah.
So that was
God, well, and I mean, Joe gives you grief, reasonably so, for your timing of departure.
yeah.
But let's be honest, what Joe and Russo deal with today, both with just social media and people having such easy access, and let's be real, when you were covering the Wild, people were thrilled to have a team back. There probably wasn't a lot of negativity, whereas today it's like, all right, we've been doing this thing for over 20 years. What are we doing here?
That's a great point. That's absolutely the case. There was no, as sophisticated as the fans were when I got there, there was nothing the Wild could do that was wrong. They had great ownership back at the time. Bob Nagley was the owner. Doug Rosbrough was the GM. Everybody loved Doug. And then Jacques Lemaire, who is by far the smartest hockey person I've ever been around. And I've been around, Joe and we both covered John Cooper, who I think a lot of. John Tortorella is one of my favorite all-time people that I ever covered. You hear the stories about him, but he's actually really good to cover. But you're right. Like, everybody was on board with what the Wild was doing. The expectations were not high. And yet they somehow managed to meet those and surpass those expectations. People didn't, back then, I remember a few years earlier, the Ottawa Senators won 8 or 9 games their first year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the Wild was somewhat competitive their first year. And they had Marian Gaborik was a star right out of the gate pretty much. So it was, they were good enough that the fans were really into it. Today, yeah, it's, the Wild's lack of playoff success. I tease Joe about it all the time. Like, Coach watch, better not go out this night. Tonight, somebody's going to get fired, half joking, but I'm sure that's what you guys deal with all the time.
Well, and like, you think people are obviously very hockey knowledgeable and sophisticated here, but every single article we write, I feel there's like 4,500 GMs commenting in there. Everyone played and coached their sons, so they know automatically more. They know what Giant Hines knows and everything else like that.
And it's a good thing that Russo doesn't engage with them.
Yeah, it's good that he doesn't start any fights.
When he does, I love it. I live.
I'm kidding. He engages all the time, right? It's
he's done it more and more the last couple of years, but there was a stretch where he tried his hardest to toe the line, be professional, and now he's like, "No, you know what? I'm pretty comfortable with where I'm at. I'm gonna tell people how I feel."
Yeah, that's awesome.
There's that GIF out there, like if he torches you, it says you got roost. And there's a picture of a Russo. You got roost.
Beautiful.
And so you mentioned Jacques, and we had Sean Chambers on the pod too. He was obviously a former North Star, Dallas Star. He said
I covered him with the Lightning, Sean Chambers.
Yeah, in the original team there.
Yeah.
He said he learned more in his first 2 weeks with Jacques than he did his entire career. And that was he played for Hitchcock and all the other. He played for really good coaches. Give me favorite stories with Jacques that kind of illustrate what made him such a unique guy.
I remember talking to Willie Mitchell one time, defenseman for the Minnesota Wild, and he was telling me the same thing. And Willie, I think, had played with him a little bit in New Jersey before he came to the Wild. But he was telling me that he said that Jacques was talking about playing a guy coming down the wing, and Jacques was telling Willie Mitchell, he goes, make sure you look at his inside skate, the skate that's closest to the center of the ice, and which way it turns, because that'll determine which way. And Willie's like, wait, what? I do what? He said, I never imagined, Jacques was so far ahead. Mike Faber from Sports Illustrated said one time, he may have even written it, that Jacques would have been perfectly content just to play a game of hockey on a whiteboard with just pieces.
Yeah.
That was his ultimate, just coach it, how to coach the game. And the players are almost incidental to the whole thing, but the sophistication of just how detailed he could get, and I was just amazed. I was just blown away. And like Willie Mitchell, he would tell you little things that players never thought of, or coming down on a 2-on-1 while shorthanded. Never shoot towards the opposite, never try to go far side on the goalie because the puck will wrap around it. And Willie Mitchell was saying, how'd you shoot the puck? And he'd tell me, I should be aiming for this post or that post. And that's the type of thing that it was just really cool to watch him and also how to handle, he would have practices some days that would literally last 15 minutes. He just wanted to get him there, get him on the ice, skate him really hard, and then say, go home, and just, I think how he dealt with players, he was a superstar himself. He's one of the few players who was a Hall of Fame player who then went on to become just an elite coach. A lot of times you don't always see that. Sometimes great coaches weren't great players necessarily, or players at all, like a John Cooper. But I don't know, just the smartest guy I've ever been around hockey-wise.
And how is he with the media too? Like, I know we had Torts, and he's unique. John Cooper, smartest guy. He'll tell you that too. But very funny, sense of humor. Like, he's obviously unique in that way. And I would always imagine Jacques, for as smart as he was, I don't think he was a guy who would explain everything to you, right? He's kind of
no. And I remember the first time we sat down with Doug Risebrow, and it was Greg Johnson was the writer for the Pioneer Press back then, the first year. And we went over sort of the ground, what are the ground rules? What do you, are you off the record, on the record, on background, and we went over all that. And then we had that conversation with Jacques, and I said, Jacques, how do you feel about off the record? He said, I will never go off the record with you. Everything I ever say anywhere is on the record. Now, he said that because half the time he wouldn't tell you anything, but I appreciated going in that if you quoted him in the paper, it was something he had actually said, and he wasn't going to come back to you and say, I didn't mean for that to get in the paper, So, and also too, it was really cool. He treated the everyday media a little bit differently. I think I told you a story before, Joe. We were in a press conference after a game, and somebody who's not there every day. It wasn't from one of the main papers or radio stations. It was sort of a fringe type of media person, asked a really bad question, I thought, and Jacques answered it. And then maybe later on, I asked kind of an awkward question, and he jumped me for it, like in the press conference, and kind of embarrassed me a little bit in front of everybody. And I remember after, I was kind of sour about it afterwards. And so we walk out, and I waited for him outside the room, the media conference room. And he comes out, and I said, hey, what was that about? And he goes, well, what kind of question was that? I go, okay, I asked a bad question, but I said, I asked it, and you jumped me. The other guy asked it, and you didn't say anything. He said, you should know better. And that's why I said that to you. And in sort of a weird sort of way, I'm like, okay, I kind of respect that,
Yeah.
So I like the fact that he was always on the record. He had a better sense of humor, and sometimes he let on, but I liked how he dealt with the media for the most part.
Fair. Now,
speaking of, go ahead.
I was just gonna say how wild, not weird, trademark. How wild is it that Darby Hendrickson, who you saw there at the very beginning, has been a Minnesota Wild guy through and through until this summer?
It doesn't seem like I read that he's leaving, right? Or he's not coming back.
He's going to Nashville.
I was like, no, that can't happen. That's not right. You're not allowed. That's not that. The next thing I thought was, this would never happen if Sid Hartman were still here. But it was, it was a stunner. He was clearly one of the nicest people I ever covered. And I know I've told you this story before too, Joe. In 2002, my mom had a surgery and she passed away suddenly. And I had to, my brother was with her in Florida. She was back here in Florida. And I rushed to come back, and she was actually in the hospital for a couple of days before she passed away. But I get a phone call one day, and I don't recognize it, and it was Darby. And he said, hey, I hear your mom's sick, or maybe she had just passed away. And he said, hold on. And he talked to me for 10 minutes and just wished me the best. And this is, I was just a guy, I didn't, I covered them, but I wasn't like, obviously it was still a media player relationship. And he handed the phone to Andrew Brunette, who also went on for a great, few minutes, just talking about how sorry he was. And I always remember Darby Hendrickson just reaching out to me when my mom had passed away, and could not have been nicer. Yeah, and it doesn't seem right that he's no longer a Minnesota Wild guy. So.
Well, it says a lot that he lasted through all those regimes, right? It speaks to the character he is, the person he is, and the coach he is, that not many guys can last through like 5 coaching changes, right? Like usually they bring in their own guys. So I think that's more of a testament, or kind of more of a reality check of like, hey, this doesn't happen in sports to have a guy like that.
And I also like to think that they know how much he meant to the community, how much he meant to Minnesotans. And he is, I mean, I think if you were to make a list of like great Minnesota, not necessarily best Minnesota hockey players, but like great Minnesota personalities, players, coaches, whatever, in the history of the state, I mean, he would be in your top 25, probably, maybe 30. I don't know.
Maybe
that's a little higher
than that. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe higher. I like just as far as like impact and likability and all that stuff. Yeah.
With that, what I love about this job, I think you do too, Tom, is the relationships you build and the rapport and over time and trust, and you have great stories and memories in that respect. We also all have kind of the horror stories of things when things go awry and things go badly. I still screenshotted a text that Pat Burrell, the lovable slugger for the Tampa Bay Rays, sent me when I reached out when he got waived. It was a tough call to make and an understandably tough thing to do, but he texted me to lose my fucking number. So that was one of the things. We've all had ones that, arguments and back and forth.
Yeah.
I was curious, Manny Fernandez, like, what can you tell us about that story and how that kind of went awry for you?
Yeah, Manny Fernandez, a goaltender, kind of a little bit of a, like, no more strange than your normal strange goalie, but he was a goalie in every sense of the way, and he was decent. He was a decent goaltender. I don't think he played quite as well as they'd hoped when they first got him, but he certainly had a high ceiling. Came in, he was our number one goalie right from the start. And about midway through the second season here, he stopped talking to me. And it was just a weird, like, I'd say hi to him in a hallway and he'd ignore me. And in press car, if I went up to him, hey man, you got a minute? He's like, not now. And he'd walk away. And in scrums, he would answer everybody. He would only give me like yes or no answers. And finally I said to him, I went up to him one day, or actually I think I went to the PR guy and I said, and I think Aaron Sickman was with the one there. I said, hey, can you check with Manny? Is there a problem? He came back, he goes, and Aaron's like, yeah, Manny wants nothing to do with you. And I'm like, wait, what? I go, what happened? I start trying to think about, okay, what did I write? And I looked through the Star Tribune, all the stuff I'd written. I said, I haven't even written about Manny like in a month, like really written about him. And turns out I had, at the time, I was also doing some freelance stuff for faceoff.com. And basically it was just like, taking stuff you've already written for the Star Tribune and just refurbishing it and put it, on faceoff.com. And I had written something about he had struggled or something, but it wasn't anything bad. So I finally talked to Manny and I said, okay, what's going on? He's like, I heard about what you wrote. And then he told me it was in Faceoff. Well, he didn't even read it. He had friends read it who were French and didn't understand English, but they got it through a translator somehow. And it somehow came out that I had ripped them when I was actually complimenting them. There was a word that they misunderstood. And I'm like, what? You haven't talked to me for like 4 weeks because your buddies mistranslated a word from English to French or in French to English or whatever. And I'm like, and he's like, yeah. And he goes, I'm sorry, but I still don't want to talk to you anymore. And he did. He eventually did, but he was just a bit of a hard guy to deal with sometimes. And meanwhile, Dwayne Rollison was the other guy.
Yeah.
Who was like the greatest guy to deal with in the world. He was just a tremendous quote.
Didn't you write a big blowout story about Fernandez starting the first game or something like that?
Oh my gosh! So it was it was the second year of the Wild. They were opening up on the road, and I wrote, "Man, he's the man. He's the Manny," I think was the headline, and it was this big blowout story on Manny Fernandez. Now this is his year, and he's going to lead the Wild, and so we go to practice the day before the opener. It's like I said, it's in San Jose. And Manny's still on the ice. Dwayne Rollison's coming off. And I said to Jacques, this is like 6 o'clock, like there. So it's like 9 o'clock Minneapolis time, right? Mm-hmm. And I said to Jacques, I said, hey, why is Manny still out there? He goes, oh, because we're playing Rolly tomorrow night. I have a big blowout story, the season opener, and they're going to start Dwayne Rollison. Like, here's the Manny. And then I decided to like jam it into saying Manny Fernandez, who will play actually game 2 tomorrow night in Arizona. Yeah, so I forgot about that.
That's pretty
Those
good.
are the things that, sometimes you get things wrong and it just,
I mean, the plan was he ended up, he was going to be their number one goalie, but it was back to back, and Jacques wanted him to play game 2. And Jacques didn't understand that. No, I need Manny to play tomorrow night.
Oh, that's good.
Your Sunday paper.
Yeah.
What's the biggest difference or what is the biggest transition for you going into writing about, political media and politics in general? Like, I know how much you enjoy covering sports and how good you've been at being a columnist covering sports, but like what excites you about it? What drives you crazy about it? Like, how is it so different?
The biggest difference is, like, there were a lot of days when I had to write a column. It was my day to write the column in the paper, and I wake up in the morning, I had nothing, and I'm like, I can whip out something. I can take a topic, something going on with the Tampa Bay Bucks or something going on with the Tampa Bay Rays. I can whip up a column in 20 minutes. I can't do that now. Like, you have to know what you're talking about a little bit more when you're dealing with like national politics and you're writing about like Joe Biden and Donald Trump and because the stakes are a little bit higher. And I will say that working in sports got me ready for writing about politics, because as passionate as people are about Trump and people are about Biden, they're just as passionate when it comes to Gopher football or University of Florida football or any of that stuff. So it's the passion same. I do like it because you get a sense of you feel like you're sticking up for the media. You feel like you're sticking up for journalism at this job that I have now. That and I also like showing how stories are done so it's transparent so people can understand. Like, these are people who are working really hard, journalists who work really hard to produce really good journalism to help democracy, not to certainly hurt it. But it can be challenging to when, oh no, I'm going to get a bunch of emails tomorrow.
That feels like a given.
Yeah.
I mentioned you having like a nice little Sunday a week ago, maybe you and your wife going for a walk or going for lunch, and then Joe Biden drops out. Like, with your day just kind of like,
well,
the
last, like I said, the month I sat down and I watched the debate, and it literally was like a minute into the debate, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a disaster for Joe Biden. Like, I thought I'll just monitor to make sure no one says anything really dumb. And like a minute in, like, oh my gosh. And then one of those nights I went out, picked up a bunch of food, brought it home for me and my wife, getting ready to set up, have a nice little dinner, maybe go out to the pool afterwards and turn on the TV. And there's been a shooting at a rally at Butler, Pennsylvania for Donald Trump. And then the next week on a Sunday, I get back have a nice big lunch, come back. I'm going to take a little nap, watch a little golf for a few minutes, and then get up and write my newsletter. And there's Joe Biden dropping out of the race. So yeah. And then, like I said, everything. And then today, I thought I'd get to today and actually some good news. But I thought today I'm going on vacation starting tomorrow. It's going to be a nice, relaxing, last day, and then the big news that Evan Gershkovich from the Wall Street Journal was released from a Russian prison today, which is actually fun to write about, actually. So
yeah, no kidding. And off of the shooting topic, and this is one, Joe, I haven't asked you about yet, and I figured this is the best time to ask both of you. I'm obsessed with the Florida man stories. I'm just going to read a headline and see if either of you want to run with it. Florida man arrested for bringing gun to hockey game. You guys don't know that, huh?
I don't know that. It wasn't Russo, right? It wasn't an old Russo story from his days of covering the Panthers.
So May 7th, 2015, Lucas Cassidy, 27, brought his weapon to Amalie Arena, where firearms are expressly prohibited. And it goes on from there. But I didn't know if either of you had any knowledge.
Joe, you would have been covering the team. Were you covering
the team? I was covering the team that year too. That was the year they went to the Cup final that year.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, we were both at the Tampa Bay Times too. I'm sure that would have been like a big story, like, if it was.
Yeah, it probably was in the Tampa Bay Times at some point. Did not know that. There you go. That's a good one.
All right, we'll circle back on that one.
Yeah. Do you have since people are getting to know me in this market a little bit more, obviously through the podcast, like seeing me and everything like that. Do you have a favorite Joe Smith story you wanted to share, like a on the road story or anything like that? People might be nice to me, of course, but like I would have people.
I'll be nice to you. So we were covering the Stanley Cup Finals with the Lightning when they went and played Chicago. Early in that series, in the first round, they played the Detroit Red Wings, and Mike Babcock was the coach. And Mike Babcock starts every press conference, he would come out and he would say, "Hello." That'd be the first. He started everyone, "Hello." So it became a catchphrase for Joe and I. Would go, "Hello." So the Lightning ends up going to the conference finals. They played the New York Rangers in the conference finals. They win Game 7 in Madison Square Garden. There's no way we thought they would win that game. So Joe and the Lightning were going to be off the next day. So afterwards, we're like, we have early flights. Joe was staying in one place. I was staying at my son lives in New York City, lives in Washington Heights. And then a couple of people from the other newspaper, the Tampa Tribune. So we're going to have one beer. We're going to go find one beer, and we need to be back at our rooms wherever we're staying by like 1 o'clock because we have like 7 o'clock flights. So of course we get done with our last beer and slices of pizza at what, 3:40, 3:45 or whatever. So one of us made the flight back to Tampa. One of us did not. And Joe was the one that didn't make it back, but he did cancel and took a later flight. So then fast forward, we go to the Stanley Cup Finals. Lightning plays Chicago. They lose Game 6. The Lightning does. Series is over. We go to the media hotel, and there's hospitality. We're having a few beers there, and we have to leave the hotel at 6 a.m. for our flight to go back because we thought we might have to go back for a Game 7. Turns out we didn't. And so I tell Joe, I'm going to bed. Joe's like, I think I'm going to go get one more somewhere else. I'm like, no, don't you dare. He goes, no, a couple. Who'd you go with? Pierre LeBrun or
whoever was? We walked like 4 blocks somewhere. It wasn't necessary. It's always that one more beer that gets you.
So 6 o'clock the next morning, I'm in the lobby, 6:05, and I told him I will leave you. I am not waiting. I will leave you. So I call his room, no answer. Call his cell phone, nothing. I get in the taxi and I go. And I go, and we're flying out of, I think it was O'Hare, right? So, and we were staying downtown. So it was, or maybe it was Midway, but wherever it was, there was no way Joe was going to make it. I go through security, do all that stuff, and the flight is like at 8 o'clock, 8:30 or something like that. It is now 7:30, and I call Joe, and Joe wakes up in his room. He's like, "Hello," and I'm like, "Where are you, man?" He's like, "Oh no, I slept through the alarm, blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Well, you're going to have to get another flight. I'll see you back in Tampa." So I get on the flight. This is 7:30. The flight's like at 8:30. Get on the flight. I'm looking at a newspaper. And the flight's empty. And all of a sudden I hear, "Hello." And I look up and there's Joe. I don't know how you could have possibly packed and loaded in a taxi and gotten through security from downtown to O'Hare or Midway, whichever one we were at.
I was so lucky.
Like 40 minutes.
I must have left some stuff at the hotel room, and then I make sure no lights were out there, and no traffic, and then security. Like it had the perfect storm for me to make it. It was the perfect,
but for you to make it was amazing.
That's awesome.
I know you're probably like me, Tom, like to golf, but not good at golf. But our last question, Scott can give it to you.
Final question brought to you, as always, by our good friends at Waggle Golf. First, make sure you head over to getyourwaggleon.com. Throw in promo code SP10 to take 10% off your entire order. I got to ask you here, if you were to pick 3 people, dead or alive, athlete, celebrity, doesn't matter, to round out your dream golf foursome, who's joining you out on the course?
Wow. Okay. So that's a pretty good one. A Tiger would be one of them, right? Just to play with perhaps the greatest golfer who's ever lived. So that would be one. I think I would maybe like just from a sports angle, maybe like Mario Lemieux, just because he's one of my favorite all-time hockey players.
We'll get along, Tom. That works.
Yeah. And then it might be somebody like Serena Williams or somebody who's I find Serena really fast. I don't know if she can play. I can't play. She says she can't be any worse than I was. I know they're not very exciting answers. They're all sports guys.
Nah, I'm good with it though. That's good.
Yeah, I think that would be a fun foursome.
Who's riding with you?
I think Serena. just because I think I'm fascinated by her dominance and I'm fascinated by her other interests. And I think she's one of the coolest people ever, really. Yeah, I've been watching a little bit Inside the Arena, or In the Arena, whatever that show's called, the ESPN. And I'm just fascinated by the elite athletes. There's something about when Brady was here, it was actually fun that I wasn't covering him because I was just fascinated just to watch his process. And there's such a what drives them, which is, I think, is really cool. You know, Brady would walk around with whatever spot he was picked in the draft, right? Like that number in his wallet. I'm like, you're the greatest quarterback in the history, but you still have a chip on your shoulder about where you got drafted. Stuff like that, I just find super fascinating.
Good Michigan man right there.
I knew it. I walked right into it.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. I know you have the massage and happy hour daily there at Poynter at, roughly about this time. So I'll have to let you go, but enjoy having you on and talking back in the early days of the Minnesota Wild when everyone was happy and no one wanted to flip out and quit on everything. But I think the glory days will be coming at some point.
Well, good luck with that. What you need from me is for me to come there, work for a while, and then leave, and then things will go great again.
Turn around. Yeah.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Tom. Good to have you.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Joe, I know this was a fun one for you in particular, just the relationship you have going back with Tom. I had a great time chatting with him. Awesome guy. Wish I had met him and chatted sooner, but looking forward to those Twin Cities beers that'll be coming up at some point.
No, absolutely. And he covered the Wild in the early years. He covered Lightning before I did. I learned a lot from him, covering hockey. And I thought he brought a lot of perspective on kind of where the organization started and the franchise started, and some names, familiar names for a lot of people on this podcast. Memory lane there from Jacques and all the players and Rolison and Manny Fernandez and in that. But I think it's interesting to look back on that versus where they are now to see. But yeah, he's a lot of stories and poking fun at me, of course, which is it's still allowed in this podcast, still allowed to make fun of me. But yeah, we appreciate Tom for that.
Yeah, and you're not going to follow in his path too deeply. You're not going to go into political writing, are you?
No. It doesn't sound quite as fun, especially in the last 6 months or so.
I'll take Wild fans in my comments over the far left or the far right any day.
Yeah. Though we have a local joining a ticket with the governor of Minnesota joining as VP for Kamala Harris. But yeah, I won't be leaving. Recently signed an extension with the Athletic recently, so I'll be sticking around a little longer.
There we go. Well, final segment here for the episode. As always, we bring you Keyboard Warriors, weekly hot take segment. And again, always brought to you by the delicious beer of Barrel Theory Beer Company. Rest of the summer, be on the lookout for new beer releases. Check their Facebook, Instagram to see what's dropping. Check out the food truck schedule. If you're going out to a game at CHS Field, walk right up the street. It's like a 3-block walk. Simply the best you're going to see in St. Paul. And we'll keep you guys apprised for what you can look for this year in, I guess, the final year of the XL Energy Center operating name. Joe, I got one. I don't know if you have anything that's come up for you recently, but my personal one, and it goes off of our spoiler discussion earlier. I think season 2 of House of the Dragon is arguably worse than the final season of Game of Thrones. Go off.
I think you're right. I mean, I didn't like the ending to Game of Thrones, but I didn't hate the season as bad as this season felt like it dragged on to me for the season 2. Like, I felt there was too much kind of, only so many times I could watch Daemon see ghosts, and the only time I can see him in all indecision every back and forth. Like, there aren't as many likable characters for me in this show.
It is weird, right? Like you hate everyone and you have to decide who you hate the least.
like there's even characters in Game of Thrones who were quote unquote bad guys, whatever like that. Like you still end up liking Jaime Lannister a little bit. You still kind of, certain segments of
they make you empathize.
Yeah. Like I really, there's not really a lot of people in the House of Dragons that you're like, oh, like maybe Rhaenyra or, I don't know, like,
there's no redeeming characters.
The best character already died 2 episodes ago.
They always do that.
When her dragon went down, thanks to thanks to Aemon. So like that was the best my favorite character to me. But I think this is probably worse than the Game of Thrones ending, or worse than the last season of Game of Thrones. Even though that was rushed, even though I thought they could have done better. Even though a lot of things, there was still a lot of really cool moments in the fight scenes and like, the end and, and there was more likable characters for me in that show where I still felt like I could.
The one character that they were like building us up to get excited and like someone that we could get behind and support, Cregan Stark, did not appear the rest of the season. They introduce him right away, episode 1, and then it's like, oh yeah, he just doesn't exist anymore. Come on. What's the point?
Yeah. And obviously the one Stark turns into like the new king, right? Or whatever. So, and the one that you root for the whole time is gets sent to the fucking wall, like after all that, so, yeah, I'm hopeful in 2 years if I actually care about the show still, if I'll be excited about it like as I was for Game of Thrones. Maybe I'll rewatch Game of Thrones in the next 2 years while I'm waiting for this one to see if that'll make me like or hate the show even more.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And of course, they've already got another spin-off that's coming out, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I'm not even sure what the plot is. I just know it's supposed to be like sandwiched right in between House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. It's like, this is going to be 100 years before Game of Thrones, and House of the Dragon is 100 years before that. That's as much as I know.
Yeah, I don't know. If we are to start seeing relatives of the Game of Thrones characters, are we going to start seeing that stuff? Like, it's just crazy. I don't know how many spin-offs I can watch at this point.
They didn't do a great job locking me in with this one. Like, first season of House of the Dragon, like, was it incredible? No, but like, was it enough for me to be like, yeah, I'll check out season 2? Yeah, it was. Season 2 crushed my confidence.
Yeah, I don't know. It's maybe my feelings will change after this year or so. Maybe I'll get really excited when he comes back and do the teaser and trailer to finally figure out what happened for all these mountains that are colliding and the Dragon War to come. But I guess it's easy to be pissed off right now if I just watched it and been like, I really saved my 1 hour of my kid napping and to watch this shit.
I budgeted for this.
We waited, we stayed quiet, like we made a snack, we're gonna watch this, and this is it. And we're like, my wife's like, if this is the ending, this is really fucking suck. I'm like, this is the ending.
Yeah, right. You get to like 10 minutes left in the episode and you hear the kid cry like, I dibs, this one, go, and you just book it for the kid.
Yeah. Oh my God. Time alone time is more precious now than ever. And then so for that to be an hour of my investment.
That's tough. Well, hey, what you need to watch, and we talked about this, that'll hopefully redeem it. You've got to catch up and watch the first season of Rings of Power, Lord of the Rings series on Amazon. Anyone that liked the movies or the books, I think that it has gotten very unfair criticism. Like, I'm going to go complete opposite of what I've said about House of the Dragon. I think that the Lord of the Rings series on Amazon is actually really good. At least I really liked it. But again, I like the prequel type stuff, and I was deep enough into everything going on that I thought it was set up really well. Anyone else that's watched it, like, please comment, let me know. I'm curious, because like, critics said it sucks. That usually means it's good, I guess, but there was a decent amount of fan blowback too. So if anyone else has watched it, or if anyone goes now and watches it at this advice, because we're like 3 weeks out from the new season dropping at the end of August, please check it out. Let me know if I'm just off my rocker.
My hot take is that taking a young child on a pontoon boat is a great idea. Hot take, yes or no?
There we go. The only thing that's going to be tough for you guys, because like we happened, where my kid was born in December, like it lined up perfectly that we could get there. You're just going to have to be like so careful because like doctors say you're not supposed to put sunscreen on a kid until they're like 6 months. So like we were going to go Memorial Day weekend and my wife's just like, no, we're just going to wait. We're going to wait and hit the 6 months so I don't have to worry about it. I'm like, fair enough. But I don't know. I think the road trip itself is probably more the scary part than the boat. I think the boat could go well, and if not, you just turn around and go back and dock. But it's the first pack and play experience, which you've already been training and practicing. I'm sure it'll be fine. But I know our first like weekend away with the kid, until we got through it, like it was just anxiety for me, just being like, okay, is it going to go okay? Because I'm more anxious for my wife's sake than mine, right? Like I'm like, I know she's on edge. I just want her to get through this so that we can keep going up north. This is like a test and we need to pass. Whereas for you guys, I don't think that'll be as much the case. I know you guys are big travelers, so like this isn't going to break your spirits, good or bad. So
it's only an hour drive. So if it really bad, after 1 or 2 nights, you'd always drive home, And, I think we need to take a step because we're doing a trip in the end of August or flight. So this will be great practice. It'll give us, confidence or not and be like, okay, we can do it, or at least learn from it. So that way when we go on our first flight and our first trip where there's a wedding and stuff, that it's our first rookie voyage. So we'll see if this turns into a movie or not. But we got him a swim shirt, like a long sleeve swim shirt and like the whole bodysuit, He's got a big floppy hat. So none of part of his skin will touch, and pontoons have shade over them, So,
the floppy hat's a game changer. That very, very photogenic.
Yeah. Kids love it. And so we'll keep you guys posted. If I'm not on next week's podcast, you know why. Either we'll be grounded or what, or need time to recover. But I think this is part of being a dad is creating adventures for your kids, and he won't remember it anyways, I'm sure, right? So he's like 7 weeks old. So
there we go.
But thanks to everybody for listening to the diatribe of being dads and about House of Dragons, and obviously a lot of good Minnesota Wild talk, and clearly a great guest with Tom Jones, memory lane for a lot of Wild fans to the early years and stuff like that. So thanks for joining, and continue to comment and rate us, whether the YouTube channel or anywhere you listen to the podcast. And we'll have a lot more cool guests coming up the rest of the summer as we kind of wrap into start our next season. So thanks so much.
That's right. Anyone that's new as well, hit that subscribe button, drop a 5-star review, and let us know, like, who do you want to be future guests? And make sure you're subscribed, because next week we will be dropping a great interview with Scott Wheeler talking all about the Wild prospect system. Not one you're going to want to miss. But as always, we appreciate all of you for tuning in to this week's installment of Fellowship of the Rink. You stay classy, stay to hockey.